up YouTube? Something a bit different for you today. We're going to have a look at a bit of literature. Now is the time to be doing your homework and your planning for next year. So what we're going to have a look at is one of the books that comes highly recommended by near enough everybody on Facebook, YouTube, anything like that. So as you can see, I've received it, it's not been opened, and we're going to have a look at it together. So let's crack it open and see what we can see. So I'm going to try and sort of have a look at it with you. It's going to be my first impressions. So this is the 2019 edition. And it is by Allan Buckingham, Allotment month by month. So let's have a look, see what we've got. Yellow. So we're not going to go through every single page. We're just going to have a sort of a rough look through, sort of see what sort of stuff it covers, sort of what the pages are like, and then I'm going to sort of read it and get on with it for a month or so. Try and put this in frame for you. I'm going to read it and sort of try and get on with it for a month or so, and then I'll do not a follow-up, but a sort of second half of this video, as it were. It's all going to be one video. I'm going to try and keep this short. But yeah, so let's get to it. Let's have a quick look. So, as the name suggests, it looks, at least from the contents page, like the main bulk of it is sort of set up as an allotment calendar. So you've got months, you know, it's obviously sorted by months from the beginning of the calendar month. So it starts in January, runs through until December, and it looks like it's got things to focus on each month. So like January, I don't do mine in January actually, which is peculiar, is a feature about pruning your fruit trees, your pear and apple trees. April, about preparing a seed bed. May, double up your crops, so I'm assuming that's with regards to successional planting. And this is sort of how I work. So as you see, October, it talks about constructing raised beds. September, make your own compost bin. So we'll have a look at some of this stuff. We'll pick a month. I mean, we're in September, so we'll see about heading straight over to September. We'll have a quick look at the troubleshooting. And like I said, then I'm going to get on with the book for a few weeks or a month. You know, try and read it, and we'll reconvene, and you'll see the second half of the video. So let's try and have a look at September, because that's where we are now. So where are we? There we go. So looks very well laid out, very well. You know, some nice illustrations. And it looks like there's a foreword for each month, so we'll quickly read through this one, just ever so quick. September marks the onset of autumn, certainly does this year. At this time of year, early crops will be coming to an end if they haven't already done so. It may be the last month for French and runner beans. It's actually something I'm going to cover in another video. Courgettes, tomatoes, peppers, chilies, aubergines and cucumbers, and sweet corn, which mine have come to an end, but I started early. Later crops should be coming into harvest now, so lifting your main crop, potatoes. Not too sure I agree with that. I think you'll find that probably most people have already taken them out. Pulling leeks, yeah, I agree with that. That's definitely definitely true. Winter squashes, yeah, your first ones, yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I've had my pumpkins are up. Picking apples, yeah, spot on for apples, right time of year, provided they haven't already dropped. Pears, yeah, plums, yeah, damsons and autumn raspberries. You may even have your first Brussels sprouts, celeriac, swedes, leeks, and as it says, this year certainly isn't over yet. I couldn't agree more, it isn't over yet. And then as under your foreword, you have your top tasks for September. So we've got harvest, remaining summer vegetables, beans, tomatoes, peppers, sweet corns, etc. I'm not going to sort of cover every word. Pick your late plums, your mid-season apples and pears, and autumn fruiting raspberries. Yeah, that's spot on. Sow the last of your oriental and salad leaves. Mine have already been in and out, but I think this year has been a very strange year. Things, especially brassicas for me, have come along very, very quickly. I think the thing to remember with literature is, when it comes to gardening in these turbulent times, there is no hard and fast rule. And certainly one of the major problems with literature is they don't take into account your geographic location. Obviously, it's not possible. So certainly, you know, when reading these books, you can't use them as a hard and fast rule. So, for example, this may well say to plant sweet corn in, I don't know, let's randomly pick February, which may well be okay if you're down in Cornwall somewhere, down south, where it may be starting to warm up enough in February. But for us up in the sort of the Midlands and the north of the country, you know, there's a 4 to 6 week divide in planting times. So you know, things like that you do need to bear in mind when you're looking at literature. I do tend to find that sort of the RHS Grow Your Own app, that's very good. That does take into account your geographic location, as do some allotment planning software on the internet. There's a couple of free ones, but I'm not going to get into those today. I might do a video. So let's have a look. What have we got? So we're still in September here, and yeah, we seem to be straight into a list of, you know, what should be up, what should be ready. Once again, I think it's definitely an excellent idea, but I do think it's not taking into account geographic location. But, you know, I may eat my words on that. There might be a section somewhere earlier in the book that says to factor these things in. But yeah, quite a bit actually. It's not a great deal. I mean, there's a lot of pictures, and what I do like is sort of tomatoes. It sounds silly, but you know, I see a lot of forum posts this year saying my tomatoes aren't red, or my tomatoes are red, do I pick them now? And you know, to you and I that have been doing this a while, we kind of think, well, you know, where are these people coming from? You know, don't they know what a ripe tomato looks like? But no, some people don't. So, you know, be constructive, tell them, but tell them in a way that's not abusive, that's not putting them down. Yeah, still on about with harvesting. You know, what can be out now. So, I mean, if you were reading this ahead of time, what you could be doing is like, oh, right, okay, so if I plant these now, they come out in, you know, I get a harvest of melons in September, or apricots come out in September, or you know, figs or plums. You know, that's what a raspberry looks like, that's what a blackberry looks like. Yeah, I'm on board with this so far. It looks good, it looks like it does the job. Sowing or planting in September, yeah, okay, couldn't agree more. It looks like onion sets. Your leafy vegetables, yeah, I couldn't, yeah, spot on for me for spinach, cabbages. As you see in my previous video, I put my cabbages in just last week. Yeah, it looks quite I'd say the illustrations actually showing quite a good job there. I would have liked, it probably does say down here, it does, but I would have liked some sort of marking on the illustration that says, you know, this is the spacing that we're using. But yeah, no, it looks good. And here we come on to the monthly feature. I'm not going to sort of dwell on it, you know. If you want to know how to make a compost bin, then look it up, or even better still, support the author and buy the book. But yeah, I've got to say, first impressions, pretty damn good. The book, yeah, planting garlic in October, fruit trees, yeah, I'd say it all seems very straight up and down. Ooh, okay, so we're into crop planning here. So if you want to grow peppers, Let's see, does it... See, once again, I mean, I disagree with this, but I have the ability to do this stuff indoors from December. So I actually start my chilies back here, especially your super hots, because they require a long season. But, yeah, yeah, I've got to say, sow in depth, you know, where you've got important tidbits, you know, sow in depth, planting distance, row spacings, it's separated out. This looks a bit silly. Troubleshooting pests, aphids, red spider, white mite. But that's not troubleshooting, that's just telling you what pests you can get. Yeah, that's a bit silly. But chilies are something that I'll be covering next year, so, you know, come see me. I'll come see the channel. And then, crop planning. Must grow essential herbs, yeah, alright, fair enough. Talking about fruits, different fruits, so trying to think if there's any questions recently. I certainly had one on grapes, so it'd be interesting to see if grapes are covered. I've noticed they are in the harvest planner. In fact, we did strawberries in the video. So let's have a quick look at strawberries. Most strawberries produce a single crop each year between late May and the end of July, depending on whether they are early, late or mid-season varieties. There are also so-called perpetual varieties. These would crop more than once and keep on producing into October, or at least until the first frosts. Although strawberries are perennials, they're not everlasting. Replace them every 3 or 4 years. That's something that I didn't talk about in my last video, but it's spot on. After about 3 years, I did mention older plants and things like that. I didn't really go into why. After about 3 years, strawberries tend to slow down producing, which is why we capture the runners. Now, obviously, a runner in its first year won't produce much. In its second year, it'll be its biggest harvest. And its third year, it wants replacing. So you have to factor those things in. And, you know, it's talking about when to plant, planting depth. Planting distance, that's interesting, 18 inches apart. That's actually what I went for on mine. Talks about mulching. Talks about alpine strawberries. That question came up quite a lot. Or does come up quite a lot in Facebook. So there's definitely a bit of diversification in this information, and I think it seems to be very, very thorough. Yeah, I definitely see why people talk about this book the way they do. A to Z of pests. I would have liked to have seen images of, you know, what allium leaf miner looks like on the plant, things like that. But you know what, if you were to cover everything, you'd end up with a for the old boys out there and the old folks out there, same as me, you'd end up with an Encyclopedia Britannica for each type of plant. So you just can't do it. So grapes, yeah. This is, I'm going to be reading this one. I'm going to probably read this straight as soon as we go off camera. But yeah, so my initial thoughts. Then a quick sort of little roundup. My initial thoughts, very good. You know, it tries to diversify, it tries to be interesting. So when you come to cucumbers, sorry, you've got, you know, we're talking about normal cucumbers, we're talking about gherkins, we're talking about, I'm assuming they're crystal apple, not crystal lemon. But yeah, it's not just saying, oh, you know, so market more, blah blah blah. It seems to cover a bit of a range, so yeah, definitely worth a look. I think this is currently on sale on Amazon for I think just under a tenner. I will put a link in the video description below. For those of you that like to search for a book using, let's try and get this in frame, an ISBN number, try and make sure it's focused for you. The ISBN, if you can't read it on screen currently, is 978-02413-60002. And also, actually, this is why they probably haven't gone into pests and diseases. This is what I'm saying to you. You know, if you were to cover everything in as much detail, you'd need a series of books. And it looks like we have a series of books. that one definitely might be worth looking into, so I might look into getting that one. But yeah, initial opinion of the 2019 Allan Buckingham allotment month by month seems very comprehensive, seems very straightforward, seems easy to follow. So yeah, I'm going to read it for the next few weeks, and I'll come back with my pros and cons, where I think it's lacking. It may well not be lacking. Certainly for the beginners. I mean, we're all beginners at some point, aren't we? We all have to learn. So yeah, let's reconvene in a couple of weeks and see what we think. Until then, I'll see you the next time. Hey up YouTube, back with the second half of my review of Allotment Month by Month by Allan Buckingham 2019, the newest edition. Yeah, so as I said in the first video, we've lived with this book for nearly a month now, probably, yeah, about a month. And I must admit, for a book that's about vegetables, it's quite the page turner. You know, even reading stuff that isn't necessarily applicable to this time of year. So, like I mentioned in the first half of the video, the allotment calendar. You know, reading through that, and especially sort of the projects that are listed. See if we can sort of show you, or at least list a few. So in the January one, which is actually something I'm going to talk about, is a page I'm going to talk about anyway. The feature is pruning apple or pear trees. February, give your soil a health check. In actual fact, just to plug a future video, the next videos I'm probably going to be putting out after this one, which will give me a chance to do the construction and sort of piece it all together, is going to be, I'm not going to call them an allotment startup guide, because it's not a guide. It's more along the vein of, what would I tell myself if I could go back to when I started? You know, what have I learned in hindsight, basically? I do intend on it being sort of a guide. You know, it is going to be a reference point, hopefully, for some people, but it's not, as I will describe in the video, and as I've said in many of my other videos, I don't believe that there's a hard and fast rule for the majority of things we do on the gardens. I think that a lot of it is experimentation, but that's a discussion for another video. You're going to get used to the sight of this table, especially through winter. I am going to play about with the colour correction, because at least on the viewfinder it looks very yellow, so I'm going to see what it looks like when I edit it, and I'm going to try some different settings as I'm working my way through the video. So I've marked some spaces that I think, you know, are great to point out, and that are points that I mentioned in the first half of the video that I've then gone on to find out, oh, it is actually there. So we'll begin. So I don't want this to end up being a 20-minute video. So first section I want to look at is this that they call allotment know-how. I don't think the title's that great. I think it's the title's very preachy, but the information that's in here is relevant, and certainly very, very plentiful. So it goes through things like that I want to discuss in the video, and I will be picking up on some of this stuff, especially this sort of little bullet pointed area down here. in my video, because we will be discussing literature and reading and planning and things like that. But I will be starting right from day one of going to view your allotment site. And that is principally what this covers. So you've got from assessing your site, and then it talks a bit about weather. Now, the one thing I mentioned in the first half of the video was that it doesn't seem to talk about regional differences between, for example, Dorset and Birmingham, then from Birmingham to Leeds, and then from Leeds to Newcastle. There is a noticeable difference in when you need to plant things between all those regions. And the easiest way to discuss that really is to discuss first and last frost times. They will be local, they are available online, but once again, we'll talk about that in another video. What I did like on this one, about this section, is it's very much pro and con. It's very much, talks about designing your plot, beds for your plot, talks about the no-dig system, not in any great depth, and it is something also that I'm going to talk about. Crop rotation, not something most allotment holders, especially in the first few years, have to worry about, unless you hit from day one, you go, right, I'm going to grow X brassicas, Y tomatoes, and Z roots and onions, and they're what I'm going to grow every year. If that's you and that's what you've done, then by all means do a crop rotation plan from day one. But if, like me, you're experimenting with different crops, just be mindful of what you planted last year. Is all that is the primary thing really. But what I did like in this section was this. I liked it and disliked it, because I think you don't need everything it lists here. I think if you were to come down to it, yes, a fork, yes, a spade, yes, a good pair of secateurs. Trust me, if you get into allotmenting, a good pair of secateurs are worth their weight in gold, so pay that value. I mean, I've actually got these ones here. They're called Felco Model 2. I will put a link in the description for things like this. But once again, it's equipment, we're going to talk about it later. But certainly, that page, I couldn't agree more. Trowel and hand fork, rake is very handy, and a Dutch hoe is very handy. But then it goes on to say things like cloches and covers and, a ridger. I've never owned a ridger. I've been at this 3 or 4 years. I don't own a ridger. And it stays down here, sprayers, wheelbarrows, cultivators. They're great, but you don't need them. The great thing about allotments is they tend to be a community, and if you don't have something, chances are you can borrow it, or buy it. But we'll talk about that in depth, and then we get into the allotment calendar. Now, this is what I was talking about with regards to the features of the month, so to speak. The main jobs for the month, and they believe, or this book believes, that January is when you should do your apple and pears. I disagree. I tend to do mine whenever the last leaves have fallen. Then once the last leaves have fallen, I give it a week or two. Then I prune, winter wash, and re-grease band. They are videos that are coming up in winter. But I will say the how-to points here are spot on. They really are spot on, and the tips, once again, really are spot on. I mean, there's things that I've learnt here. I've been pruning my trees for 2 or 3 years now, and there's things that I've learnt here. Which one was it? It's one of these, and I'm not going to look for it because I can pretty much remember what it said. But it said about when you're making your cuts, so you can see here, hopefully you can see in this picture, it's been cut at a collar or spur, or even there, with a saw. And it goes on to say, cut from the halfway through from the top, and then cut the rest through from the bottom, and cut at an angle. Now I was aware of cutting at an angle, but I have always had the problem on the thick heavy branches of the branch snapping and fracturing down the remaining wood that's staying on the tree. Now a lot of you are probably saying, well, that's common sense for us to you know, cut half from the bottom and half from the top. I never thought of it, and I wouldn't mind betting there's a lot of people out there that never thought of it. So, you know, once again, just reading the book and I have gone from cover to cover a couple of times, you know, it's taught me something that, yes, is out of season, but it's something I'm going to be doing soon, and certainly will be something that I will be doing in years to come, for years to come. So the next one is sort of heading into the allotment calendar. I've simply marked October because obviously we're a stone's throw away from October. The illustrations, the pictures in these are truly really nice illustrations. That is a Turk's, oh, it says I don't have my finger on it, a Turk's turban squash. Not something I've grown, but it certainly looks the part. So yeah, you get in your month by month, you get a brief sort of overview of the month, a sort of a little bit of a monologue really. You get a brief breakdown of what to do, what of your tasks. You get your harvests of anything that you may or may not have planted. It's split down into, if I remember rightly, into vegetables, salads, fruits, and that's usually it. And then it heads on to your sowing or your planting, if there is any applicable for that month. It doesn't do this for every month, because obviously in some months you're not really planting much of anything. But in this one, in October, you know, it's talking about garlic, it's talking about broad beans, cabbages, collies if they're a winter variety. It talks about your onion sets, peas, rhubarb crowns, currants and gooseberries. Good time to plant new bare root, and also to move existing plants. Grapevines and strawberries. I mean, I've done mine a bit earlier, but that's when I like to do them. I tend to find it gives them a chance to recuperate. And then the project for the month, if this is your thing, it calls these raised beds. A lot of people would argue they're just bordered beds, but it's a project and it's something to do. Now, and I do see a lot of allotmenters going, oh, I need to get my raised beds built in the middle of summer. So, well, you don't need them in the middle of summer. You haven't got time to build a bed properly, set it up properly, and make sure it's filled and properly tilled in summer, because you're rushing to get some crops into it. This is what I've been saying in one of my other beds, in one of my other videos, not one of my other beds, one of my other videos, about I do my construction, the main bulk of my construction, through winter, so that things are properly ready for the following year. If you need a bed and you need it now, you know, put it up when you need it. But the beauty of this book is you'll be able to refer back to this page as to how they gone done it. I don't use this technique, but then my beds are roughly, usually about a foot high. I would say this isn't a raised bed, this is a bordered bed. You know, you've got what looks like a length of 2x1 there. So it's only 2 inches high. But certainly I couldn't agree, January is an excellent time to do it. It's an excellent time to be thinking about prepping for the following year. Once again, it's something we will talk about in coming videos. Back onto jobs for October. This sort of goes back to the front page, or harks back to the front page, where you had that bulleted list. Talks about things in more depth. sort of for October. Take your carrots up, get your winter pumpkins and squashes in to cure, earth up Brussels sprouts, and how to make a vegetable clamp, which is a way of storing your vegetables through winter. More prominently, I think potatoes. I think you can do beetroot, carrots, Swedes, things like that. More about storage. This I like. This is something that goes on to another section, but it's something we discussed, or I discussed in a previous video about pests and diseases. I felt it didn't go into enough detail on that index at the back. Obviously, having since found there are more details as and when the pests and things become prominent. So, you know, great idea. And obviously now it includes pictures of sort of aphid damage and how they fitted what looks like going to be a grease band. So yeah, that's pretty valuable information at the right time of year, which is good. I've picked this purely as a section in the I think they call it growing guide or growing planner. And it's purely and simply because it's relevant to this time of year. Onions, or you're overwintering onions. You know, if you're doing overwintering, you should be in now. But the page, I will say, whilst it is very much, you know, month, you know, what to sow when, it does give a broad spectrum. And as long as you bear in the back of your mind where you are in the country, you know, if you're Midlands, aim for the middle. So for example, this says January, February to sow your seed, onion seed, indoors. So if you're in the middle of the country, aim for the back end of January, early February. If you're in the north of the country, end of February. If you're down south, you know, beginning to middle of January. Just bear these things in mind. You know, it needs to become second nature that this is always going on in your mind. Otherwise you plant things at the wrong time and you either waste money, time, space, and it's stuff that you won't get back. So, you know, bear these things in mind. But it gives you, you know, some good old, I mean, the tried and tested variants. It gives you when to plant, when to harvest, how far apart, your distances, your spacings, troubleshooting against pests. It's very thorough, and you know, whilst it is general and there are exceptions to the rules, for example, the reason I've turned the page shallots, it doesn't talk about overwintered shallots. I grow overwintered shallots every year, and then they're not mentioned. And I'm actually growing this year 2 varieties. Well, last year I grew Longor through winter, came out perfectly well, and this coming year I'm growing Golden Gourmet through winter. You know, so there are things that are missing. So read your seed packets, talk to people, ask them what they're doing, things like that. But with regards to a basis, excellent information. Same with garlic, in actual fact. I'm doing Elephant and I've got some Solent White left from last year. I'll be putting them in a long time before January. A long time. Mine will be going in probably end of October, early November, maybe even earlier. The one thing I do like on the garlic, and I think it does say it on a few other things, is don't be tempted to use supermarket garlic. Whilst you probably will get results, your specialist varieties that are specially grown or specially treated for growing on will give you A, far better results, and B, you stand this risk of introducing viruses and diseases to your ground that you may not be able to get rid of. One thing that you need to remember is that things aren't available to us that are available to farmers. treatments for your grounds and things like that, we just can't get them. You know, they're illegal to be sold to Joe Public. I can't think of one offhand now, but I know that a couple of years ago I bought a mare's tail treatment. It now can't be bought by Joe Public and is required by special license. So, you know, bear that in mind when you're thinking I'll take the cheap route or I'll take the easy route. You know, buy the specialist garlic and keep a few cloves black back. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. You don't, you know, whilst it's expensive, you know, £4 or £5 to buy a couple of bulbs of proper garlic that is for the purpose of growing, bear in mind that you may not have to buy another bulb of that for years to come. But that's a topic for another video. And then at the back here, I just wanted to prove that some of the things that I had seen or had commented on were covered, and it wasn't just a fallacy. I mentioned in the first half of the video, because we saw this page here, the A to Z of parasites and pests, that I would have liked it to have been in more depth, or at least had a little image of what the damage looks like. Lo and behold, when I actually read the book, there it is. So you've got apple sawfly, whitefly, you've got aphid, you've got, oh, what's that one? I can't remember. Wireworms, that's your potatoes and things that are underground. You've got your cutworms, that's a big one. Cabbage white butterfly, you know. Obviously we all know this one up here, Mr. Slug. Yeah, so it has genuinely been an eye-opening experience actually reading it properly from cover to cover. And I've got to say, and this is, I'm not sponsored in any way, shape or form, I've got to say, because it's true, the best allotment book I've had and I've read. I've read probably 10 or 12 books when I started, and I dismissed a lot of them, all of them, in favour of YouTube, because the information wasn't relevant to me. It was too old school for me. This tends to blend together the old school and the new, and it puts it together in such a format that even a complete novice like myself can follow it. You know, I've no formal education in how to grow things, apart from what Grandad taught me. And this bridges that gap in knowledge on a lot of subjects. So, one, definitely for the bookshelf. Personally, I think it might even be one for the coffee table. Because it's a pick up and put down read. It's not something that you have to read pages and pages of. It's also a quick reference guide. So once again, Allan Buckingham, Allotment month by month, cracking read, and such a massive information source in a good quality hardback book. You know, so many times you buy these hardbacks and they're not a decent spine and things like that. I mean, even down to the spine. It's not just a glued spine. I'm trying to show you guys here. It's not just a glued spine. It's a glued and corded spine. So it's hard wearing. They've taken the little things into account. So get yourself out there and get one. There'll be a link for the book on Amazon down below. So until next time, I'll see you later.